Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OnlyLandFans Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Dan Haberkost. Dan Haberkost's first foray into real estate was at 16 years old when he was managing a portfolio of rental properties for his boss at the time. Dan started his investing journey at 21 when he purchased his first rental property while still in college. From there, Dan has continued to buy more rental real estate while simultaneously building a land and development business, Range Land LLC. Via FRL, Dan has bought, sold, and built on hundreds of pieces of land across the country, which has given him unique insight into the land business in dozens of different markets. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Kendall, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you back on. You are actually back by popular demand. You are one of our most downloaded episodes on the Only Land Fans podcast. So we're always excited to have you back on.
Awesome. Flattered to hear that. Hope I can be as good the second time.
I have no doubt about that. Today, we're talking about lessons, tactics, and strategies learned from 250 plus deals. My goodness, that's a really impressive number. So, before we jump right into that, Dan, can you talk to us a little bit about, for those who are listening that may not be familiar with you, can you give us a little bit about your background and how you got into
Mhm.
land?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I grew up in Ohio, in a rural part of Ohio. Everyone was from there and never really left. And so I knew I wanted to leave. So I was working full time through college, going to school full time, working 40 plus hours a week. And that wasn't fun. But I figured, hey, I'm going to graduate without debt. And if I can manage both of these, I can start some sort of business when I'm done to accelerate myself and give myself some freedom. Started reading different books when I was in school. And like everyone else, it was when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it was like the light bulb moment. And so I went and bought a duplex. That first duplex referenced in the bio there. And then I moved and bought another single family house as a house hack because I was listening to Bigger Pockets at the time. And so it was all about just buying and holding rental real estate. But I quickly realized the whole low and no money down thing isn't really applicable to scaling a large portfolio of rental real estate, right? And so I knew I had to find some sort of active means of making money to then go be able to build a portfolio. And so I was living in Colorado at that point, Colorado Springs, for anyone who's familiar. And I went to the local real estate group there, met a guy who'd been doing land and development for 40 plus years. I'd drive an hour south every weekend down to where he lived, help him in his business, work with him, work for him, whatever I could do. He was terrible with technology. So that was one thing I knew that he didn't. And so he was building houses, and you need land to build houses. And that's what got me into it. My first few deals, I think I wholesaled a lot to him for $1,000. I went and found lots for us to do little projects on or do some pre-sales on. So I learned about land from the frame of infill construction. And so that's where the construction experience came from initially. And eventually I just took his business model and ran with it with a heavy emphasis on the direct to seller marketing for land. And so I've been doing that since the land side of it since 2019. And so Front Range Land is the active vehicle for scaling the income that had allowed me to continually buy more and more rental properties.
That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned you got started in 2019. How has your land business evolved since then?
I can't get a deal for 100 mailers anymore, so unfortunately, that wasn't sustainable. You never know what you have till it's gone. Heavy emphasis on cold calling now, whereas initially it was all mail, still a staple in the business that's remained steady the whole time. But heavy emphasis on cold calling. We can talk about that. That's been really productive. And really just making it more of a business. You've got to be good. You've got to be able to close, right? You need good salespeople, good systems, be able to have a brand and be able to build legitimacy in the seller's minds. And this varies from one part of the country to another. I focus on a lot of the competitive areas where it's easy to sell, but then more competitive on the front end. So it's not as severe as far as the increased competition in a lot of areas. It's just where I choose to do business. But yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing is just turning it into more of a real business with a strong sales team, thorough SOPs, systems, and processes. And yeah, so it's really just a marketing business for land, if you think about it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such a fantastic distinction. I've talked to many land business operators out there, and the ones that are really at the top of the game will tell you this really is, it's a people business, but you also, it's a marketing business. You are marketing for land is what you're doing. And definitely resonate with that. Now, you mentioned that you are in very competitive markets. I hear this very often from lots of different people. I get the same question many times. is land oversaturated? So, what would you say to someone saying, hey, is the land market oversaturated in our current market?
No, the people who say that, they're just speaking from the point of reference of what we were dealing with 5, 6 years ago. I think it's ridiculous, honestly. It's still much easier than other types of real estate. It's specific parts of the country that are really competitive. And even in those specific parts of the country, the bar is pretty low. We still get deals all day long because people just don't follow up. They don't stay on sellers. If there's any complexity to the deal, they just let it go. We're getting one under contract this week for 45. It's worth, I think, 85, something like that. It's a decent deal, and everyone's passed on it because it looks like it's going to need a quiet title. And the seller's willing to pay for it because he feels like he's stuck with this land, but no one's willing to deal with finding an attorney and doing that. And probate's the same way. We have a bunch of probate deals we're doing right now, markets where the data is a little harder to pull. I think a lot of people are sold a bill of goods in the sense that, oh, spend $1,000 and in 30 days you're going to make 20 grand. It's not how the business works. It's a real business. I was updating our conversion sheet. I have a sheet where I track when we got the lead, when we got under contract, when it sold, all that. And it's usually 130 to 150 days before we monetize a lead from the day we get it to the day we make money off of it. And so it's not that it's gotten more competitive. It's not that it's gotten too competitive. It's that it's just a real business now. And I still think it's much easier and much more reachable than many other businesses as far as barrier to entry to starting.
That is a fantastic set of insights. Now, I want to drill down a little bit more on this competitive component. I know that a lot of people that are just getting into this industry, they may not necessarily know exactly how to comp land. They may think that the only way to compete is to give the highest offer. And so what we're seeing a lot of times in these ultra competitive markets is that the sellers are getting ridiculously high offers. How do you approach that when you come across that situation in your business? Imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with OnlyLandFans School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources, the on-market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, OnlyLandFans School has you covered with step-by-step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join OnlyLandFans School at olfskool.com today.
We're pretty aggressive about this. My guys will make a joke of it and say, "Okay, how much earnest money did they put up?" And especially there's a few markets where we know it street by street. We're very confident what we can sell at. So we'll say, did they put up non-refundable earnest? Because we will. And then we'll ask them, was there assignment language? We'll just go through the motion of everything that we think that buyer, quote unquote, is probably trying to do. And that gets us deals all the time down the road where they come back and, okay, they didn't close. That has worked well for us, right? Offering non-refundable earnest. That's been a big one, honestly. And then also just saying something along the lines of, oh, why didn't you take that? That sounds like such a good offer. Wow, that's more than it's worth. A lot of times that builds the illegitimacy of those offers in their mind. So we have a variety of different kind of responses and SOPs around that, and those are just a few.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that it does multiple things, not only build the idea of illegitimacy on those offers, but it also builds the validity and builds your authority as a business where you're talking through, it's not just price. Let's talk about the actual where the rubber meets the road and getting the deal done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd
So,
love to talk. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, go ahead. Yeah, you're
Well,
good.
at some point, I'd love to talk about seller avatar because this is such a big thing that I think people are missing, and it's a corollary to that. So, you want me to go into that?
Yeah, I do. Let me ask one really quick question just to give us some context here. When you're structuring these bread and butter deals, doing maybe these infill lots in ultra competitive markets, are you guys doing a traditional flip where you are closing on these and then turning around and dispoing them? Or are you doing wholesaling? Are you doing double closes? How are you structuring these deals?
Mostly flips. I think we've done maybe 6 assignments this year, but mostly just flips.
Okay, excellent. Stage is set. Let's talk about seller avatar.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of people get this wrong, and maybe it's different in different parts of the country. I don't know. But in all The parts of the Southeast I'm doing business in, I've done a lot of business in Colorado and North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina. It's not distressed. It's almost never distressed. They're never in a hurry. They don't care about a quick cash close. Everyone's telling them they'll pay or no commissions. We'll pay all the fees. Like all that's pretty null. What's on their mind is legitimacy. Am I going to get scammed? Am I going to get paid? How does this work? I haven't bought or sold real estate in a long time. I just want someone who's legitimate that isn't going to waste my time to give me this price that I want. Because that's another thing that I'm finding. We're going to keep tracking this, but one of the biggest things I emphasize with my guys on cold calling is making sure to get some sort of number out of them on the first call. And we have a whole methodology of ways to ask this multiple times because, and again, I'm going to keep tracking this because I had it before, but almost all the deals we close, they gave us some sort of number on the front end, or they were the clueless heir that just says, I want to get rid of it. But they almost always give a number. So we're focusing on that more and more. And so, anyways, to that end, a lot of times, the seller avatar just has some number in mind for whatever reason, and they just want someone who's legitimate that they can trust. And so we have a nice FAQ sheet. It has the attorney or title company's number right on it. Hey, call Christina, call Tammy. She'll walk you through the process. If you want us to send proof of funds, we will. Put up an earnest money deposit. We have a better business bureau account, all that sort of thing. And then also just really training my guys not to be pushy, not to be overly salesy, and try and especially with the older people. Some people are all about no, sign the contract on the phone, or we're not going to send it. We don't do that. In fact, I think we would have lost a lot of the deals we get if we had gone that route. I'm open to people disagreeing, but that it doesn't work for the avatar in my mind. I say to my guys, be patiently persistent, and this works. A good example of this, there was a lead, I think it was March or April. We originally got this lead. The guy wanted 40,000 and it should sell at like 75. And probably 80 now because I think these have actually gone up a little bit. And he said, I will not sign a contract via DocuSign. I want to talk to the attorney or title company. It's in Florida. Stereotypical seller avatar, right? He's just worried about scams. We sent him all our paperwork and everything to show we're legitimate. Said, look us up. Said, we're happy to send you proof of funds, but he didn't end up persisting on that one. He talked to the title company. She assured him because we've literally done hundreds of deals through her. And then we mailed him a nice contract with an FAQ sheet. He disappeared for quite a while. 6 months, I think it was April. Look in our CRM, probably 50 follow-ups in there, some handwritten letters. Turned out he had just gotten sick. He'd been in the hospital for a while. He's out and he's fine, but he thanked my acquisition manager, also named Dan, ironically, for just being gentle about it. We weren't too pushy. We didn't say, hey, our offer's going to go down. None of that crap, just patiently persistent, gentle voicemails. Hey, John, are you okay? What's going on? A nice handwritten card. And he fits the seller avatar that we see time and time again. It doesn't always take that long, but they're worried about scams. That is the number one thing on their mind, and they're sick of the BS. So I know this has been a lot. So the last thing I'll say, right on our postcards, I've had this on every version of a postcard we've sent for years. Tired of fake offers? We can send proof of funds and introduce you to our title company. So anyways.
Yeah, that is fantastic. That is so good, especially when you look at it, when you understand your seller and you really understand what that seller avatar is. They're scared of scams. They probably get a ton of different fake offers, like you mentioned, in ultra competitive markets. Making sure that you are building out your customer experience and that customer journey. That way you're knocking down all of those objections without it even coming up first. That's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So let me ask you, what offers are you guys looking for in terms of what your buy box criteria is? Is it like 40 to 50% of market value? What's the most that you'll offer on a property from like a rule of thumb?
It's a spectrum. So we have an SOP sheet on this, but it's evolving because there's been some markets in Florida where there's certain types of land, whether it's certain multifamily zoning or the 2 acre lots amongst the 1 acres where there's none available. Where if you get those specific lots, it's like liquid. They'll sell in 24 hours. And those sorts of lots in the markets where that's feasible, we'll go higher. Where we've done dozens of them and we have a high level of confidence, we'll go to 70% if we have to, just to get the deal done because it sells in 30 days every time, right? Generally, in the Carolinas, we do a little lower because everything's more expensive. The attorney transactional costs are more expensive. Generally, the realtor fees are more expensive, and we're closer to 35 to 50, depending. And then in Florida, anywhere from 40 to 60, but again, we'd almost have to talk market by market because there's just so many variables. The less clear the comp, so I'll just summarize the spectrum. On the right hand, you have those very clear, homogeneous infill lots that are extremely easy to comp. And you can see dozens or hundreds of them selling every month, right? We'll go much higher percent of value there. And then on the left side, you have I think, but there aren't a lot of comps, not that much is trading. There's a lot of variables. It's not a major metro. And on that side of things, we want a larger margin. There's one we're buying in a newer part of North Carolina at 15,000. There's some back taxes and stuff. We'll probably be all in at like 18 or 19. It might sell at 55. It might sell at 40. I'm not sure. It's really hard to comp it exactly, but I know there's enough of a spread there that we'll be fine. So it's a spectrum.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Do you guys have like a rule of thumb in terms of this is the minimum net profit that we want to make on a deal whenever you're going through the valuation process?
Try to go 10K at least. Every now and then we'll break the rule if they get a lead that they say, hey, I want X, and we know it's worth 2.5X. So they want 5K, it's worth 15. It's in a market where we have a realtor, we have the title company, sure, buy it. It's easy enough. We already have the system, just go through it. But I've really been pushing to only market where the lots are worth 60, 70 plus. We've really pushed up our average profit per deal this year. And so trying to continue that trend.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, you mentioned when we were talking about sellers that you don't really have a very strong arm approach to sales, which I completely agree with. That's what I use in my own business. I'm curious, what does your follow-up process look like? What's the cadence look once you talk to a seller and you're starting your follow-up processes, and what do those specific follow-ups look like? It's not, hey, are you ready to sell? Are you ready to sell? What does
Mhm.
that look like?
With everything, just big picture here, I want to step back for a second. I try and teach my acquisition people how to think as opposed to just train them to be robots, right? To auto respond. And so to answer that, they know to finish every conversation by asking the seller when they should follow up or establishing some sort of buy-in from the seller on when they're going to call again, and then getting agreement and then setting that on the calendar, right? On in the CRM. Now, of course, sometimes people don't answer, things happen. I forget the exact iteration on the SOP sheet, but if somebody was a hot lead or agreed to the price and then disappeared, we'll call them every other day or every third day for a while, and then we'll intersperse calls from different numbers. I can't tell you how many times one of my guys has a seller just go dark, and then 5 weeks later, one of my other guys just tries, gets on the phone. Oh, yeah, let's do it. And for whatever reason, they just jived better with the other personality, or so that's really worth trying. If it's just you and one other person, you could call them or have a friend call them, right? If you're a solo entrepreneur right now, but that's been useful. So if they tell us we're going to talk again, or yes, I want to move forward, or yes, I want you to call me, we are pretty aggressive about follow-up iteration, but we're very gentle in how we leave the voicemails and the texts. Everything is not pushy. It's just, hey, you know, we allocated for this property, or hey, we're having our budgeting meeting this week, so let us know.
Yeah, that's really good. When it comes to follow-up, what tools, technology, automations are you using for follow-up?
I don't have this as solved as I would like. Pebble's the CRM we use. I have not found any good ways. I've tried to set up Zaps with email. I can't find anything that works very well. So it is just a matter of one of the rules for my guys is they never leave a deal without a subsequent to do. Set a task set, and then at the end of every day, they always triple check all their tasks are handled. And that way, nothing slips through the cracks. So it's just the CRM for now. I don't have any auto follow-ups. I do. It's just I tried to have generic email set up, and I do have ways to send them through the CRM. It's just I find there's too much. There's just too many unique situations and conversations where I couldn't create something generic that made enough sense to start doing it that way. So I don't have a great solution there as of now, honestly.
Yeah, I think we're all working on it. We're all working
Yeah.
on that automated follow-up process. Now, You've mentioned that you work in several different markets. What is your approach to evaluating a market that you're thinking about entering? You're not quite sure if this is a market that you want to be in. How do you go about evaluating new markets?
So a lot of the markets we're in have simply been because a competent realtor referred me. And a competent realtor is worth their weight in gold. I posted a story about this on social where I sold a lot for 92 last week in Florida. They were getting a land and house package loan for the closing, and the land only appraised at 72. My realtor put together a great argument with comps as to why it was worth 92. He got them to come all the way up. It's still closed. So some of the markets we go into are just because we have really competent people there, realtors, and there, of course, has to be transaction volume, and there's still demand. Now, beyond that, some of my favorite markets, I just look around Zillow for sold through ratios as far as in the last 90 days, how many came on the market versus how many sold, and then pair that with, are they all 10,000? Are they all 50,000, 100? And just because I know so many people in land, when I can find places like that I've never heard of, that's a good sign. I've asked ChatGPT and gotten some markets that we're now doing our first few deals in right now that ChatGPT recommended. So it's been a mix of referrals of just qualitative, qualitative evidence from talking to people. I'll say too, when I find places where there's tons of demand, right? You're looking on Zillow, there's lots of solds, you never heard of it before. If you start calling realtors and they're all familiar with what you're doing and they all know what assignments are, you can do business there, but just know that means there's already competition. Whereas I remember when I first got into Brunswick County years ago, it was amazing. It's not now, it's competitive now, but I talked to a few realtors and referenced a lot we were buying, and they were at their computer, both of them. I swear this happened to two realtors. They go, "Oh, that lot's not on the market. You can't buy it." I'm like,
Oh,
oh
okay.
no, you can buy things off market, believe it or not. So finding incompetence on the business people side of things with consumer demand has been a really good sign. Granted, you're going to deal with frustration, but there's opportunity in those places. So that's a really qualitative metric. So those are a few of the ways. I don't have it down to an exact science. And then the other thing I'll say too is just going to places that really work for me and then just expanding outwards.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with realtors, how valuable they are. How do you go about finding these realtors and vetting them to see if this is someone that you'd like to work with?
Yeah, so I haven't done that for years, but what I have my guys do, or what I did it when I did, is I go on Zillow, look for sold lots, and a lot of times you'll find names popping up consistently if you click around enough and look at the listing. Is it well done? Do they have spelling errors? Does it look like they want to sell this? Call three, four, five of them and just be straightforward. Hey, Kendall, look, got a working on a few land deals that we'll have ready to relist here shortly. When I do this in other markets, I stick with one realtor. I have realtors I've given dozens, one close to 100 listings. Do you like land listings, or are you not really interested? And that's a good way to do it, because just approaching it from the, hey, no worries if you're not interested right away, takes the pressure off. And also, I told them, hey, this will be your listing within 30 seconds, because it's not a cold call like you're calling sellers, but it's a cold call in the sense that their defenses are up, because realtors are sensitive to people wasting their time. So you need to make it clear right from the beginning that you're not going to waste their time. So sometimes it's even worthwhile to say, hey, I can throw you a couple $100 or whatever just for your time if you'll help us on these. And I've never had anyone take me up on that, but it tends to just make the conversation go much better. But make sure they've sold a lot of land. Ask them questions once you've gotten buy-in and it's clear that, okay, I this is someone that would potentially want to work with me. Then the script flips a little bit, and you should be asking them, how many lots have you been selling, or what do you think of this area, or what are the things that I need to watch out for in this market that might be not applicable elsewhere, that sort of thing. And you should be able to get a feel for whether or not they're competent pretty quickly.
That's excellent. Now, are you using realtors mainly for dispo? Is that
Hmm.
essentially what your dispo process looks like, is you get these realtors and then they work on selling the properties?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. And so have you noticed any type of changes or shifts with the changes? There's been a lot of talk in the realtor industry right now around all of the different changes that are going on in representation agreements, buyer paying commission, things like that. Have you come across any type of changes or shifts in the realtors that you work with on the dispo side?
No, I wouldn't have known there was a change if I
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how much are you paying in commission for your realtors?
Florida, 6%. So 3 and 3. North Carolina, the average is 10%, 5 and 5, but the main guy I used to resell there will do 4 and 4 because I give him a lot of business. We have a good rapport. Although I have one part of North Carolina where I didn't even ask the guy, I just assumed it was going to be 5 and 5, and it was 6%. So that was great. I didn't complain about that. So just won't open my mouth there. And then we're doing a few in Tennessee, and I forget if that's 8. I don't remember, but it's generally more expensive in the southeast, and then out west, Florida, I'm used to 6%.
Excellent. Now, shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned that on the acquisition side, you guys are doing cold calling a lot. Are
Mhm.
you doing that in-house? Are you working with someone else to cold call? How does that look?
All in-house. We use Mojo Dialer. Got the triple line dialer going, and that thing is powerful. You can get through a lot of data. You got to work your guys up to it because that's a lot to be going through. But yeah, that's been powerful.
Very good. And so, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have when running a cold call department?
Yeah, the biggest thing, of course, finding personality types that enjoy doing that, that stay motivated, that like kind of the hunt is important. And that's a long conversation. But assuming you've got someone willing to do that or you're doing it yourself, the biggest challenge on the seller side is not letting people waste your time. And this is why earlier I mentioned the asking 3 times what their price is. The longer we've done this, I've realized the the more efficiently we can get them to throw out a number, the quicker we can. You think of the giant funnel, and it's a big funnel with cold calling. The quicker you can force them through the funnel and sift and find those needle in the haystack speak. And so I think that's really the biggest challenge because you don't want to get people off the phone too quick and automatically discredit people, but you're sifting. And so you have to be quick or else you're going to just get your time wasted with due diligence, with long conversations, with building rapport. And so our best solution to that has been asking for price. And so the first time we ask, it's a straightforward question. Oh, okay, Kendall, what were you looking for it? Great. That obviously is after they've said they do want to sell. They rarely will give you a number, sometimes, but rarely. Let's say it's a, I don't know, or you tell me first, or that sort of thing. Okay, take a second, build a little more rapport, ask some more just due diligence questions, something to take the mind off for a second, and just, you don't have a range, any idea what you want for it? Something like that. And then if they still won't, the third one, we'll either just do an anchor ourselves. So if it's a market where we do a ton of business, which a lot of these are, I'll have my guys, they'll throw out real street names and prices. And we bought this one at 30,000, this one at 34, and that one at 32. And those are fairly similar to yours. And just see
Mhm.
what they say. And that usually gets some sort of reaction. And it leaves the door open for you a little bit where you didn't say theirs is specifically worth that. Obviously, you implied it, but you could always say, let's just say you could come up a bit or the market's grown and you can sell it for more than you could have when you bought those. You can always say yours is a little nicer, a little bigger, and can rationalize why you can come up higher from that if you need to, right, to close the deal. Another one I like for areas that we don't have an idea of price yet because it's not simple, it's not homogenous, it's acreage, and there aren't a lot of sales. I don't know, Kendall. I can take this to my finance team, but are you going to be at like 10,000 or 100,000? That one usually, okay, no, we're not at 10,000. We'd probably be, that one works really well.
That's
So
really good.
that's the 3 steps. It's not perfect. Not everyone will give you something, but it works to really help sift faster.
That's great. Can you give us like a 30,000 foot view of what your sequence looks like from cold call to the offer?
Yeah. It totally depends whether it's the infill where we know what we can pay ahead of time, or it's the acreage in somewhere new, or just somewhere new that doesn't have a lot of comps. So if it's the infill where we already know, and on the cold call, they're amenable to a price we can pay, they'll close it right there. Again, if the seller is on board and they want to. Doesn't happen often. So let's just pretend it's like that 5 acre piece we just sold. That was in a new market for us. Barely any comps, very different lot sizes and shapes, and so not straightforward. So for those, we always get agreement on when we can talk again. We always set clear expectations of what we're going to do. And if they're pushy about an offer, we'll say, look, Kendall, if I give you an offer right now without properly doing our due diligence, visiting in person, I'm just going to be another person that pulls out on you. We need to do our due diligence. A real buyer checks these things because if they don't, they won't have money to buy lots like yours for long. Or we'll say something like that. And they like, there's got to be a mutual respect in the whole conversation of, hey, our time and money is important too. And you need to take it seriously or we're not going to do business. There's a reciprocity, right? And so I really try and drive that home in my guys just in how they speak and communicate with these people. And from there, they'll explain to them exactly what we're going to do. We're going to check it out in person. We get an agreement on when we'll call back by. Hey, you will hear from me no later than Thursday or Friday. Now, we try to cut down the time to offer. But look, if it's a big piece of acreage that's complex in a new area and we need to get someone there, it might take 3, 4, 5 days. Ideally, it's 24 to 48 hours, but that's not always the case. And sometimes the seller says, hey, call me next Tuesday. I'm going to my sister's wedding this weekend. Great. We'll call you next Tuesday. It's a little ambiguous, but the things that are consistent are setting expectations both on what we're going to do in the interim and when that follow-up call is going to be, what we'll do on that follow-up call, and where we will go from there.
That's great. And so what do your offer presentations look like?
Yeah, they're pretty straightforward. It's funny. I'm happy to say I have one of my guys managing the other two, and I'm blanking a little bit on what our offer presentation now looks like because we updated this early this year and it's been working. I think off the top of my head, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, I pulled it up in the background so I can answer. Or if we're just giving them the price, that's just presumptive. Hey, we agreed to this number. Great. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack because this is really important. If they give a number that we think we might be able to get to, we get them to verbally say on that first call, Kendall, okay, now you said you want 40. I go talk to my finance department. I get approval. Our realtor visits this. We allocate the money. And I come back and we talk on Tuesday. You'll take 40.
If you're enjoying this episode of the OnlyLandFans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action.
I want you to say yes. Okay, yes, great. So important, do that. All right, let's say we're making an offer. Yeah, we just get right into it. We say something about the finance team. We like that. There's a third party that we're accountable to in the company, which they are because I make that decision in the background most of the time anyways. So something along the lines of, hey, after speaking with our finance team, hoping we can get this done, I just want to confirm. And then usually we show a little hesitation about something, the due diligence. We'll ask a due diligence question about maybe a perk test or a flood zone or wetland, something just to show, okay, it wasn't easy to come up to this number. So we do that.
Yeah.
All right. Given that, we can pay X. And then I have drilled this in their head. You always let them speak first and then see what they say.
Yeah. So oftentimes we know that unless it's a very specific situation, and it doesn't happen very often, but usually we give the offer and they don't want it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you handle if they're like, okay, I need to think about it, or that's not going to work and they won't give you a counter offer? How do you handle that situation?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is top of funnel, we really don't even get to that point of having done serious due diligence without some sort of anchor, some sort of number, something. And so that really helps with that. Sorry, I missed the second part of your question. Is what do we do if they just blatantly say no or
Yeah, what do they do? What do you do if they won't give a counter? They'll just say, no, I'm not interested. That's not what we're looking for.
okay, we like the, hey, we can send you our realtor, you can listen on market. And sometimes, I mean, we've done that. We referred our realtor's business. Great. It depends how far off we are and how hard of a no it is. Because especially having done this for a while, there's so many of these markets in the Southeast that have gone up so much that we've had deals like that then 6 months later are a deal. And so if it's in one of those places, we'll put them on the long-term follow-up. We'll tell them we'll follow up. So what we do a lot depends on how much we want that lot, how prime of a lot it is. If it's something really nice that we would love to buy, then we'll say, hey, all right, if I call you again in 3 months or 6 months, if anything, see if anything's changed. Right.
Excellent.
And then just put them
Yeah.
in long-term follow-up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really good. I've been following your social media. You're very, very active there, showing us a lot of different projects that you work on. We see a lot of construction happening in a lot of your projects. So can you talk a little bit about how does construction play a role in your business model?
Sure. So going back to the beginning of the show, that is how I learned about land. But I do simple infill construction. And that word is so significant as we're talking about lots that have all the entitlement work done, right? Utilities are in place. It's very simple. You just get the plans drawn up, you submit them, right? It's zoned already. There's a use by right. And so that duplex project I've been documenting on social, I think it took 4 weeks to get the permit for that, maybe 4,000 bucks, 3,000 bucks. So if you find these markets with endless infill lots, these kind of old failed subdivisions, but that now have demand, building can be pretty simple. It's a whole different story if you want to go create the subdivision to then build on. That's a whole different conversation. I have not done that. That gets very costly, risky, and potentially profitable, but there's a lot involved. So I just stick with the infill stuff for new construction. And what I have done for years is just done a few small projects at a time as another means of making money on the lots where it made sense. And there was a pause there. The last few I did in 2023, I had both trouble with that contractor falling apart. And of course, it wasn't a great time in the market. And so I had to stop, reevaluate, find a new contractor. So the contractor on this duplex has been good. We're just finishing it up. I'm keeping this just as a rental. And then I've got two more lots purchased and in process for just spec homes heading into early next year. I think they'll make solid sales next spring season.
That's great. So if someone's listening to this and they're used to just the traditional flip model and they're thinking about maybe diversifying a little bit more, adding maybe new construction to their business model, what types of margins are you looking at? And I know that is a wildly vague question because it can
Mhm.
differ in so many different markets and depending on the project. However, what would be the pros? Like what's in it for you to take on the new construction component versus like just flipping the lot and moving on to the next one?
Sure. So the key there and the way that I learned to do this is it doesn't have to be active for you. I post about that build because I wanted to document a real example. I haven't been in Colorado since it started. I don't do anything except disperse the funds and check in on things. So if you set things up with the GC correctly, then it can be pretty passive. You don't have to do a whole lot for these simple projects. And so it's just, I think the best iteration of this business has layers. It has the simple wholesale to retail flips, some notes paying you every month, some new construction, some subdivides. And so amongst the short term stuff, and there's always ups and downs with that. We've had the best 2 weeks we've had in a long time for closing deals, and we had a long dry spell before that. To fight those aberrations, it's nice to have the other strategies layered on top with different cash conversion cycles and timeframes. And new construction is an example of that. And so the simple single family spec builds that I'm doing heading into next year, the construction in total should be 260. That's the bid. 20-ish, it was 18 for one lot and like 22 for the other. So 20-ish for a lot. And then debt service plus realtor fees and origination fees and everything. Realistically, call it 310, 15-ish. And then it'll be like a 375 sale price. We'll make 60 grand, maybe 55. We'll see exactly per house. And so yeah, they're decent little base hits in amongst the land deals. And I think it's a useful strategy because it's nice to be able to create my own rental inventory like this. Because I'll tell you, if we want to talk about rentals, we can, because I've been doing that longer than land. And the longer I do this, I only want buildings that are younger than me and in areas where I can attract 700 or better credit score tenants.
Yeah, that's really good. Have you gotten into the short-term rental space at all, or are you like a long-term rental guy?
Almost
What's
all long term. Yeah, I have one medium term, but just almost all long term.
Very good. So let me ask, what do you see as the current market trends across the country? You're in a few different markets right now. We've talked about these longer hold times in some of your projects. So what are you seeing trending right now in terms of where the market is going?
Sure. So several things. The Southeast, the parts of the country where there's huge amounts of jobs, and growth coming, people, money, they're still booming. And I see all these headlines and just go 30 days, like sold in the last 30 days and scroll around Florida and the Carolinas. There's a ton of dirt still moving. And so I don't think that's stopping. There's so many large scale manufacturing plants being brought back to the US, decoupling from China that's going on right now all over the world, what's going on in the South China Sea and all that. So I know in Texas, there's some huge growth because of that. So there's a reshoring going on right now. I was in Charleston. My parents retired inland from there earlier this year, and that whole corridor from Charleston up to the two lakes they live by, Marion and Moultrie. I have never seen so many massive industrial buildings going up and manufacturing plants over by Ocala, Florida, same sort of thing. I said Texas. Even Colorado Springs, where I used to live, there are some huge high-tech manufacturing plants. I don't know what those ones are specifically, but so following those sorts of trends, places where there's just huge economic growth and then people, I feel very safe doing business there. Even if things get worse geopolitically or economically, those things aren't slowing down. Like Colorado Springs, especially, for example, the Space Force headquarters is there. There's all kinds of huge defense contractors moving more stuff there now, locations and employees, and then ancillary businesses. Those things are very insulated. So I like to focus on those sorts of areas personally. Gosh, I had a second point to the thought to this point, and now I'm blanking. I think that's really my main. My second point is as far as competition on the business owner side of things. I think there's been a little bit of a culling of the herd, so to speak, recently, where some people have fallen off. I remember wholesaling being so big in single family houses 18, 19, 2020, 2021, and then into the second half of 2022. I had hosted a real estate meetup for years, and the wholesalers all disappeared. And not to the same extent, but it's happening a little bit in land, I think, and I think that might continue just as things get a little tighter and we're back to a normal market. That's what I wanted to say. It's normal for there to be seasonality. It's normal for it to slow down at election time. I was doing business in 2020, and that wasn't a good analogy at that election because there was so much money being pumped into the system. That wasn't normal. It's normal to slow down, right? So, anyways, I think it's just back to a market where you actually have to put out a good product that people want, i.e., buying and selling the right type of land, not the lemons, and you have to be better than your competition. It's just we're back to normalcy more.
Yeah, that's really good perspective. Now, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about this topic of sustainability and how to
Mhm.
have a sustainable business. Can you talk about how did you set up a sustainable business model when you were setting up your business and making the shift from I've done a few land deals or I've done a few real estate deals to now I am building out a substantial business?
Sure. So Mason and I did a whole podcast episode on this on the Big Picture Blueprint a couple weeks ago. Check it out. But to answer shortly, I'd say layering on other strategies was one of the top things we talked about. So that way, I remember in 2022, some of the flips really slowed down for me, and one of my markets shut down. But I had a few new construction projects going that were really profitable, and that helped weather that storm when the flip slowed down a little bit. So that's a big one. Having some land notes is nice. I have a nice little base of those coming in every month. Having cash reserves, right? Remembering in the good times, remembering that those great months aren't every month and there's going to be hard times ahead. It's not just a steady trend upward, there are aberrations. And so having lots of reserves so that if there's a few bad months, it just doesn't really matter and you can just keep chugging right along. And also, I think just keeping a really reasonable personal budget every month helps when you just aren't wasting a ton of money and inflating your lifestyle. That's useful. And then having the rental properties on the side has been nice. That's extra income every month as well. So there's that. So those are the main things. And then more tactical in the business, something that's been really helpful and has helped reduce the aberrations is over the years, just being absolutely relentless in the follow up. We have such a massive CRM at this point. Maybe we'll have a terrible couple months for mailer leads because it has been slower these last few months for mailer leads, which is normal for election season. But a lot of these old deals from 6, 12 months ago are coming to fruition. And so it helps balance it out. And so just being in business longer and not stopping your follow up will help you down the road and create more of that regression to the mean that creates more of a sustainable, predictable outcome.
Yeah, that's really good. What advice would you have for people that have maybe done some deals before, approaching it as a side hustle, but now looking to build out a more substantial business as a business owner? Now, that's a completely different hat from just, oh, I flip a few deals to now I am a CEO of this business. So, could you maybe list like three of some of the biggest lessons that you learned as a business owner slash CEO of a land business?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have hired acquisitions first because I was good at that. And I did hire for acquisitions first because interesting, I'm good at it, but I don't like it. I was really bored of it. So that was a poor decision in hindsight. Probably lost some revenue then. Um, Number two, knowing this is just a specific thing that it took forever to get through my head. Markets aren't just done because you've mailed them a few times. Markets have been getting hit with mail by everyone for a long time. So we have a prime marketing iteration spreadsheet where all the places that we do business in consistently want to keep doing business in, we have all the areas broken down, and then those searches are saved on PropStream, and then all the different data criteria and when we last mailed, when next mail, when last cold called, when next cold call. We hit them relentlessly over and over again. There are markets we've hit 20 plus times. We still get deals. So that's something just to understand because I don't know if other people have that limiting belief, but I certainly did. And then just doing more of what works. And this I'm really stealing from listening to Alex Hermosi because I know it's true. And I all right now need to hear this of I know what to do to keep growing, to keep scaling. It's just more of what's already working. It's not as if I'm mailing and calling the entirety of the land ownership in the United States every few months. Not even close, obviously. And a lot of times what works to build a business is boring, monotonous, and a pain in the ass a lot of times. And so just setting that expectation with yourself that there's going to be constant shiny object syndrome because you're getting a little bored. And then also just frustration. The amount of trouble we have with escrow companies in the Carolinas closing contracts on time is absolutely outrageous. It just comes with the business. They won't send wires. They ship checks to it's crazy. It's crazy. Can you tell I'm frustrated? But it's just every business has its frustrations, right? And so just knowing that's a daily reality you're going to deal with, and the more business you're doing, the more pain in the butt you're going to deal with, I think is important to establish in your head as an expectation ahead of time.
That is so good. And I hear a lot of those Alex Hormozy influences in
Mhm.
that answer. I saw this just recently and it was is so obvious, but it's so true. The whole of just embrace the suck. This is not
Mhm.
easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. And that's
Yep.
why we see some of that culling of the herd that we talked about earlier is like when it's not easy, like the non-business owners just quit because it's
Mhm.
not easy. But name a business model that is. So
It's so funny to give an example of that. I was talking to one of my buddies. He's about 10 years older than me, so he's been in the business a long time. He owns hundreds of apartment units, a bunch of triple net buildings, and I was telling him how I want to graduate from the residential buy and holds to the triple net. And he goes on a long rant of everything that's wrong with triple net and all the problems. And he's, I'd rather just buy more apartments. So I think that
yeah.
illustrates
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. So let me ask you, Dan, what are you seeing in terms of the number of maybe like the number of offers to the number of contracts? Like, what's your ratio right now that you're seeing in the few different markets that you're in?
I don't have that perfectly tracked, honestly. I don't know how to track that in Pebble that well, but I mean, to really get meaningful data, you need a large sample, right? It's law of large numbers or the regression to the mean. And so I've been having my guys track this all year more effectively than we've ever tracked it before. So if we can do another call in 6 months or next year, I can better tell you the averages of that or the median of that data, maybe. Because right now, I don't think I have anything super meaningful there. I will say, as far as mailers, it's probably closer to again, I'm generalizing because there's so many different markets, but 2 to 4 thousand mailers to get a deal, and I'm doing 6x9 postcards. I don't do land offer letters. Not to say that doesn't work. Plenty of people make that work. So I'll have to get back to you on the offers to deals conversion. The things that we track really carefully are cold calls, deals added to the CRM, or actual conversations, warm leads added to the CRM, deals under contract is on their end of day
Yeah.
sheet.
Very good. Very good. So, can you tell us a little bit about what does your company organization look like? How many team members do you have? What are they all doing? Give us a 30,000-foot view of that.
Sure. So it's me, two full-time acquisition guys, and then one part-time doing cold calling. All three of them call, but one of them handles all the inbound, so he only does a little bit of calling. One of them does 2 to 3,000 dials a week, and then the new guy, we're still working him in and working. He's still learning, so it's small what he does for now. Call it 500 to 1,000 dials a week for now. They handle the transaction coordination for their own deals, the two acquisition managers, because if you find a good escrow company, they pretty much handle that for you. They communicate with the seller. They are worth their weight in gold too. So they can take a lot of that off the table of your acquisition managers. And then what was my last point I was going to make? Yeah. Oh, and they close their own deals. They'll share and pass them off when they can't get a hold of people. And sometimes that works. But I have not had success yet. I'm trying it with this new part-time guy, but because I think we can get it to work. But every time I've tried to have any sort of third-party service or where one person gets the lead and hands it off to someone else, I've never gotten that to work. So we're trying it again with a third part-time acquisition guy because in theory, I'd like that to work. It's more of an assembly line than haven't gotten it to work yet. So to be determined whether we can figure it out this time.
Very good. And what do you mentioned SOPs very frequently, your SOP sheets and things like that. What does your training program look like for new team members?
Yeah, I have a whole first day onboard sheet with a whole list of videos and everything for acquisitions. Dispo isn't as relevant anymore. They don't do the data pull, but it's almost, if you think about a coaching course for land, it's pretty much that just for my acquisitions guys.
Calling all ambitious land flippers, ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well-oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse. That's great. And so what type of, do you have like accountability for them in terms of meetings and things like that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I got the end of day sheet, and then that feeds into an end of week sheet, and then we review that together every week. When they're brand new, I'll look at the end of day every day, but not once I have some trust in them. And all of that feeds into their main KPIs they're trying to hit, which also feeds into their goals. And I get buy-in, right? You have to have all your incentives aligned. And so you have to make sure your guys, your employees can clearly see how their daily lead measures feed into those long-term goals they're trying to hit. And so everyone's incentives are aligned. And so that's how that's structured.
Excellent. And what does your hiring funnel look like? Where do you find talent? How do you find your candidates for your positions?
It's been a mix. I've hired good candidates right off of Indeed. The first girl I ever hired was off of Indeed. I've done it by referrals. I think that's it so far. Referrals and Indeed has gotten me everybody up to this point. And then I have a personality test called the Culture Index I use. That's been invaluable. Every time I've ignored that, I've regretted it. It's been very accurate. And then I just have a couple interview sheets. I'll have one of my acquisition people interview candidates as well if I think I like them, just to see how they'll fit on the team, just get another perspective. I make sure what they want aligns with what they can get out of the role. I go through the negatives of the job too. On the posting, if you hate talking to people, if you can't handle rejection, you're not going to have fun with this. This is going to be miserable.
Yeah.
So I try and be really straightforward and highlight the negatives too.
Yeah, that's really good. Let me ask you, Dan. So you've done 250 plus deals so far in your career. What were some of the biggest surprises along your real estate journey in doing that number of deals through all of that experience?
Most surprising. I think initially was just that it worked. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. This is ridiculous. And then beyond that, it worked all over the country. That's pretty cool, and that it's actually been feasible. There's so many places I've never seen that. I've bought and sold so much land. So that is still it leaves me a little incredulous. I think that's pretty cool. What else is surprising? I still think it's surprising to me how inefficient the market is and how there aren't bigger players and more consolidation and how there isn't capital available. So we got to talk about that. That's something Mason and I are working on, who you had on a couple weeks ago. So that's surprising just how inefficient the market is, how capital isn't really available. And how that's true up even into the big players. I've sold lots to D.R. Horton, and a lot of the big builders, they won't close on the land until they basically have permit in hand. And so they'll pay you more a lot of times than other people, but they have a long due diligence period and a long closing period because they put their capital work elsewhere within their business where it makes sense for them. But they're willing to pay investors huge amounts to carry the balance or carry land for them. It's crazy. And so I think just the opportunity to place capital in land and get obscene returns is still surprising to me. And I think just it's because how misunderstood the asset is. And I would liken it to mobile home parks or storage units 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever the big Blackstone, BlackRock, whatever it is, started to get involved and consolidate and make the industry more efficient and get a return in the process. I think of land that way. So that's probably what's still most surprising to me now.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about capital. How are you guys going about raising Are you raising capital for your own deals, or what does that look like?
Okay, so it's a mix. I have a number of investors I've used for years and years, right? And then on top of that, because I've been in business, I have lines of credit. Guys, if you don't know this, Chase gave me about 200K line of credit, unsecured, which I think they just checked my credit and looked at last year's tax returns or something like that, 2 years tax returns maybe, and I think it's at 10% interest. And so if you have tax returns, if you've been in business, talk to your bank, see what's available, and then I have another line just on one of my rental properties. And then Mason and I just launched a fund where we're raising money for our own deals to just solve our own problem in our business, and then also provide capital for others and do JV partnerships on land deals that make sense with other people as well.
That's great. Launching funds, I think, is one of those topics that I'm hearing about more frequently. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to launch a fund and what were some of those big tentpole moments for you as you guys did that?
We wanted to get proof of concept before doing it because we thought, okay, how much demand for capital will we have just in our own business? We need to know that we're going to be able to provide capital to other people and deploy the funds before starting a fund. And so we just started deal by deal before doing a fund. And so we got far more submissions than we could handle, funded a bunch of other people's deals that went very well. I think we did 12 or 15, maybe 20, and then said, okay, let's go start the fund. So we took some of the proceeds from that, paid the attorney, started the fund, and are working on raising money in that right now.
That's excellent. And so, if someone is interested in launching their own fund, can you give us some pointers for how you go about pitching and explaining what it is that you do and in a way that it's understandable for investors?
Sure. So first and foremost, talk to an SEC attorney so you know what you can and cannot say, what sort of structure to do. We had Mauricio Rawld on our podcast yesterday that'll be coming out in a few weeks. Is one of the best SEC attorneys in the country. So that was a great interview. Listen to that. But okay, once the legal side of things are handled, I would note if you've been giving your investors deal by deal profit splits or fees where they're getting outrageous annualized return, you're going to have to find new investors. Just FYI, that has been a challenge. A lot of our investors have been fat and happy because the deals are so quick. The annualized returns they ended up getting were outrageous, and so you need the investor avatar that is the busy educator, right? A professor that just wants to set money somewhere and thrilled with 10%, 9%, or doctor, lawyer, something like that. It's a different avatar than the one we had been using, at least in our experience.
Hmm.
And from there, people get confused, but I like to just describe it as, hey, you know what a house flipping company does, right? Great. We do the same thing, but for land. We have a giant marketing funnel going direct to seller. We buy land at a big discount. Some of it we just buy and sell. Some of it we do small improvements, resell. Sometimes we'll put new construction on it or do a little subdivide and resell that way, but it's exactly the same as a home flipping company, but for land. Here's a spreadsheet of 100 deals. There we go. And that's really the thing, because people just get confused by the fact that it's land and they don't know it. And so having this, we have this big deal compilation sheet that we're putting together, and that really helps.
That's fantastic. Now, before we move on, we had talked about seller avatars before, and I meant to ask you this question, so I'm going to jump back and ask, what does your seller criteria look like whenever you start pulling data? What types of, let's say for infill lots, for example?
So in new markets, I start with the lowest hanging fruit. So I do 10 plus years owned, out of state, out of county. And we almost never buy from LLCs. So only in the really hot markets do I market to those, but trusts are great. So individuals and trusts, 10 plus years owned, out of state, out of county. Super generic, but that is who the seller avatar usually is, right? And then from there, in markets that are producing, I'll go to 2 to 9 years owned, out of state, out of county. From there, if I still want to keep mailing and it's not time to hit those first people again, 10 plus years owned, local. And then I'll go to even 2 to 9 years owned local if it's a really productive market.
Yeah, that's really good. And are you mixing the two marketing channels, cold calling and mail for one particular seller avatar?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We hammer them with everything. Yep. It's
All goes out.
interesting. Yeah, it's because I even this week we started. Again, I'm a little out of it, which I'm glad. I believe they started doing some sort of voicemails, and we just find that for whatever reason, some people respond to one marketing medium versus another. I'm never going to respond to your mailer. You'd probably have to text me, maybe call me and leave me a voicemail. And so taking the same data and layering on different marketing methods gets new leads and new deals, and also calling it multiple times.
Yeah, that's really good. Are you guys using AI right now for anything?
Not really. I'll use it to give me ideas. I'll use it. I think I told you to think about finding new markets. And I think I asked it, ChatGPT, something along the lines of the fastest accelerating real estate markets that have the least mention in any sort of news articles. And
Mm.
that gave me some interesting ideas. That was one, but not a whole lot. And I'm sure there are applications I'm missing. But, yeah.
Gotcha. And let me ask, what would you think is just the biggest untapped opportunity in the land space right now?
And probably those simple having the capital. That's still the biggest constraint. If we could get a line of credit or get the fund up to a few $1 million, or even more than anything, a line of credit, that would be nice, where you're not already accruing interest as soon as you get it. For several $1 million to go do more of these spec projects and these subdivides, there are so many deals just sitting there where people don't have the capital to take them down. There's a piece I'm thinking about right now that's sitting on the market east of Colorado Springs. It's a clear deal. It's if you buy a pack of waters at Costco, it's X per water, whereas if you go to the gas station, it's 50X per water. And water's not a great example because people can afford a pack of waters, but people can't afford the land at the price it's at. But if you can go split it up, it'll sell like hotcakes. And it's just having that capital readily available for deals like that. That's the biggest opportunity in land, right? Bridging the gap between the family offices, the institutional capital, and projects like that. And that's what we're working to do. And it's driving me nuts if you can't tell. So we're working on that.
That's fantastic. Excellent. Excellent. Listen, I want to thank you so much, Dan. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for sharing so much and just being so generous as always. How can we help you? What connections or resources are you looking for right now?
Yeah, if any accredited investors that have any interest in the fund, it's groundupfund.com. You want to submit a deal, gupland.com, GUP land.com, and then you can follow me on any of the socials, just Dan Haberkost.
Excellent. Love it. And we'll have all of those links in the show notes for sure. Thanks so much, everyone. I want to thank you, Dan. This has just been absolutely incredible. Thank you all for joining us and asking so many fantastic questions and just really enriching the conversation. So we will be back next week on Tuesday. I believe we've got another guest on Tuesday for us. So looking forward to have you joining us again. Thank you, Dan. You are just absolutely incredible. So excited to see how your fund develops and all of the incredible things that you're doing with your projects. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks so much. Take care, be safe, and see you next time. Bye-bye. If you're interested in hearing from other seven-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at OnlyLandFans.com. Looking forward to seeing you there.